Hi, everybody. We're going to get started with our new ambassador orientation. Thank you so much for sticking on the line and joining us. We have a smaller group of staff here ready to chat through some of these slides and talk to you about some opportunities that we'll have throughout the year. It's myself and Stephanie Livingston here with you. So, hello. We're excited to talk through our new ambassador orientation and give you some tools that can help you succeed through your time as an ambassador. The first thing we want to do is just a quick introduction to our team and how we function and how we can support you on your arthritis journey. Our team is really here from the start to the finish of any barrier to care or interruption in your care that you have been experiencing. So we are here to listen and understand when a problem exists. We have a really great story banking tool that will allow you to come in and share your story with us whenever we're experiencing something, maybe like a insurance delay or an issue with an out-of-pocket cost. We're here to listen, and then we're here to channel those stories that we hear into action. We want to make sure that anytime we have an opportunity to listen to an issue, that there's also an opportunity to provide a solution. So we're going to connect you with opportunities to act through our Action Center, and hopefully we'll have some legislative solutions. But let's say a bill doesn't get passed to solve that problem. We're here to strategize with you to make sure that we can get to that next level. We're here to celebrate with you if that bill does become a law. And if it does become a law, we'll want to make sure that everybody in your state, everybody in the nation, everybody who's impacted by it will understand all of their new protections and how to exercise them. So we'll be here to help you understand those things, provide some educational materials and resources, and help you share those with your communities.
So next up is our advocacy leadership team map. So this has all of our state directors from across the country on it. So you can find your state and see who you can contact to get more information about local advocacy and other event opportunities. So, yeah.
Thanks. And we have our state directors who cover, of course, state policy in all of those regions. And that's one element of our program. Another element of our program is our federal line of work, so what we do to engage with members of Congress. And then we also have our grassroots programs. In our grassroots programs, we have 4 different programs. One of them is the Ambassador Program. We're so excited that you've joined. And through the Ambassador Program, we'll pair you with opportunities to engage federally and on that state level. So we're excited to start this relationship with you and get you on track to engage with us in so many different ways.
So what is the Ambassador Program? Here's a few quotes from, you heard from Keith Moshia just a little bit ago. And the Ambassador Program is an opportunity for our advocates to take their advocacy to the next level and participate in some curated activities for them to share their story with their policymakers and get some more work done. The mission of the Ambassador Program, ambassadors serve as liaisons between the Arthritis Foundation and their policymakers in their area. So it's a very important thing both for the foundation and for arthritis patients and families alike to be able to have their voices heard. And Julie's going to talk a little bit about what an ambassador does.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, so ambassadors, we, like Stephanie said, have a list of curated assignments that will help you to build a relationship with your decision makers, whether they're on Capitol Hill or in your state house. We want to make sure that you have an opportunity to make your voice heard, educate them on some of the issues that might be facing people with arthritis, and make sure that we have an opportunity to take action. So most of our ambassador assignments shouldn't take more than 15 minutes to a half an hour. Some of them might be a little bit more difficult. They might require going into your state house and meeting with your elected officials there or meeting with your members of Congress. Our cornerstone assignment takes place in August, and it's August recess in-district visits, where we ask that our ambassadors attend town halls or schedule in-district visits with their members of Congress to go and make sure that their voices are heard and that they are abreast of all of the important policy priorities to people with arthritis. We want to make sure that you know that your story matters. Whenever we are talking with new ambassadors, new advocates, whoever it might be, what we hear the most is that often patients don't feel super enfranchised to share their experience, to share what they've been through, because, you know, the doctor is the expert or their insurance provider might be the expert. And we want to completely erase that part of the narrative. We want to remind you that you are the expert in your experience, whether you're a parent of someone with arthritis, whether you're a patient with arthritis yourself, a sibling, a caregiver, you understand your experience with arthritis better than anybody else. And as a result, it's essential that you share your expertise in the same way that a scientific researcher might or a doctor might. We need to hear from you so that we can make sure that Congress can put the person behind the policy and learn from us and understand what we are trying to accomplish.
Great. So this is a screenshot from our Arthritis 101 briefing from last year, and this was a great moment where Representative Anna Eshoo from California talked about the power that an advocate's story can have in influencing policy, basically. Like it says here, it's our job to share our arthritis stories with Congress. It's one of the primary ways that they hear about what is important to their constituents and to their communities. So if you want something to get done, be sure that you tell people about it and let them know what you've been experiencing, what you've heard other people are going through, to be able to make the change that you need for that.
Perfect. And as we said before, whenever we have an ambassador assignment, we are trying to encourage an element of that assignment to be to amplify that message so that you aren't the only person from your district saying something, the only person from your state saying something, but that you can be a part of an army of voices who are coming to fight for our cause. So we want to take it back for a second to any high school government that you might have learned to remind you about what our federal government looks like and how you can engage with them. So we have 535 members of Congress. Those are 535 leaders that we can influence, that we can share our stories with, and that can be making decisions that are in our best interest, but only if we share our stories. So there are 435 representatives around the country. Every person has one representative and 2 senators in Congress. We have 100 senators who cover all different types of legislative issues. Elected officials at all levels they represent constituents, and that's what I am, that's what you are. As someone who lives in the U.S., you have a member of Congress who is there to listen to your concerns and legislate on your behalf. So whenever you're thinking about who you want to connect with, you know that there are 3 people who are your core Rolodex individuals. We want to make sure that we're connecting with our 2 senators and our 1 representative. And we want to connect with them throughout the process. In a few slides, we're going to talk about the importance of doing some legislative research. But there's no better symbol for why that's important than understanding and going through how a bill becomes a law. A bill becomes a law. It takes a long, long time, especially on the federal level. But essentially, a bill is drafted up to support whatever the policy issue is by a senator or representative, and they introduce that piece of legislation. Whenever that piece of legislation is introduced, it'll get assigned to a committee. And the committee will go through the language of the bill, and they'll identify the weaknesses. Committees are determined based on special interest areas. So there might be a committee on health and education and labor and pensions. There might be a committee on insurance issues. And these committees that exist on the federal level exist on the state level as well. So this process is pretty uniformly followed. Once it's assigned to a committee, the committee will look at it. They'll make any changes that are necessary to it because they're the experts in that particular subject matter expertise. And then they'll release it from committee for the full chamber to consider. Sometimes it'll go to a secondary committee if there's a second priority within there. But for the most part, it'll leave committee and have an opportunity for all members of Congress to weigh in. Once they do, they'll leave one chamber and move to the other. So if it was introduced in the House, it'll move from the House over to the Senate, and this process will start over again. Again, it'll be assigned to a new committee. That committee will make those same types of changes, have their different perspectives heard, and influence the legislation, and then it'll go to the full chamber for another round of debate, another round of changes, another round of voting, and then once it leaves that chamber, if it's been passed by both the House and the Senate, it'll go to the president or to the governor of the state, depending on where the legislation is. And if it's signed, it'll become law, but the governor or the president will have the opportunity to veto that legislation right then and there, so they can choose not to put it into law as well. So it's a long process. We've said that on both levels. And there are lots of people who are involved in making that bill become a law. It's not just that one senator who introduces it or one representative who introduces it. It's also the initial committee that sees it. It's the full chamber who gets to vote on it. It goes to the other side to make sure that they have an opportunity to weigh in as well. And then it goes all the way up to the president, to the executive, the governor. So we want to make sure that our voices are heard in every step of this process. So some things that we want to encourage you to do as an ambassador, as part of your new ambassador orientation, we want you to understand who your members of Congress are. We want you to understand what key committees they might sit on. So if they sit on a committee that has to do with a health issue, that's something we want to make note of so that we can do some targeted outreach to them when that is the case. We also want to teach you a little bit about how a typical congressional or state house office might be structured. We have our member of Congress at the top, and that's the name that you'll know immediately. But their team is made up of a number of policy experts at different levels. They have their chief of staff. They have a legislative director that sets their portfolio of legislative asks, and of course, their legislative assistants. And a legislative assistant is really our primary person that we want to be focusing our efforts on. Now, you might not be able to pick up the phone and call your member of Congress on their cell phone or immediately, but you can call over to their office and set up a time to talk with their legislative assistant. Legislative assistants, like those committees, are dedicated to particular interest areas. Now, if they're in the House, they might have a number of interest areas that they follow: Veterans Affairs, health, insurance issues, and so on. But if they're in the Senate, they're going to be really dedicated to one or two issues. So if you're talking to someone who is a health legislative assistant there, you know that they're going to have a high level of expertise and be able to communicate back and forth with you. What we want to encourage you to do is introduce yourself to your members of Congress, and you can do that through our Action Center. But when you do, we want you to specifically ask for the contact information of the legislative assistant who covers health issues in that office. When you do that, you'll have a direct line to make any of our future ambassador assignments, any of our future asks. You'll be able to make that call to action right then and there. We want to give you a brief understanding of some of the policy priorities that we are looking at as a team. On the federal side, we talked a lot about this on our first call today, but we want to make sure that we're reforming any barriers to care that lead to delays in access to treatments, absurd prices. We want to make sure that we're increasing access to care by taking down some of those barriers. So one piece of legislation that we're focusing on is to reform step therapy barriers nationwide. Now, you might not know what step therapy is just by hearing those words, step therapy, but you might be more familiar with the patient story of someone who goes in, they're experiencing symptoms, maybe for the first time, maybe they've had arthritis for a long time, but they go and they talk with their doctor and they want to change or identify a new medication to try. And they do so. The doctor writes them a prescription. They take their prescription and they file it with their pharmacy. And then maybe they'll get a call from their pharmacist, or they'll talk to their pharmacist when they go to pick up the prescription. And they'll find out that instead of being able to access it, their insurance company has decided to deny coverage. And they've denied coverage for a short time because they want to see a patient try and fail a lower-cost alternative medicine before being granted coverage for the doctor-prescribed medication that they've just received that prescription for. Now, this is a process. It's part of utilization management, which is a tool used by insurers to make sure that they can lower their costs over time. And in some cases, it can be appropriate. However, when we're talking about this in terms of arthritis, these delays in trying and failing medications for long periods of time can lead to permanent joint damage, can require surgery at the end of the day, can really make it difficult to attain a quality of life that makes your days easy to live. And so we want to make sure that step therapy, if it is required in a way that doesn't create an undue burden for our patients, especially arthritis patients. So we have step therapy reform legislation on the state level and on the federal level that we're trying to accomplish. Another of our federal priorities is to ensure that we have appropriations or government funding for arthritis research at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes for Health, and at the Department of Defense. Having line items dedicated to arthritis research allow us to understand our disease and get us closer and closer to a cure for our disease. So we want to make sure that that continues. We also have our Congressional Arthritis Caucus, which is a body of members of Congress, who are dedicated to listening to and being a voice for arthritis issues. We have one of the largest bipartisan caucuses on Capitol Hill dedicated to understanding arthritis in a new way. We want to continue that growth and continue to strengthen our numbers there. We also want to address the pediatric rheumatology shortage and make sure that every child with juvenile arthritis has access to a pediatric rheumatologist who can best serve their nuanced needs. On the state side, we're trying to accomplish many of these same things. We want to pass step therapy reform legislation and make sure that access to care is timely and appropriate when it comes to a prior authorization request. We want to make sure that formularies are transparent when it comes from your insurer so you know what will be covered, how to anticipate it, and how to make sure that we are accessing the best care that we need. We also want to make sure that the networks provided by or covered by our insurers are not narrow, that we can get to all of the specialist care that we need, and that out-of-pocket medication costs are not egregiously high. And we have legislative opportunities at the state level to make sure that we can have reforms in each of these areas. We want to just take one second now to encourage you all to think about ways to share your arthritis story. We mentioned before that you are the expert in your care, and we want you to share what that care experience has been with your elected officials and decision makers. We want you to be honest, to be concise, and to be you. So we have some sample sentences here of what your one-sentence story might sound like, might feel like. And one that I think is really helpful to picture is each month my medications cost $1,200 out of pocket. Sometimes that means I can't afford to pay my rent or to pay my car bill or to pay my tuition or whatever your one-sentence story might be. We also have ones that talk about delays in care. What would happen to you if you couldn't access your medication for your arthritis or your child's medication for their juvenile arthritis? What would that mean for them in getting to attend school and extracurriculars? What would that mean for you in getting to attend work? We want to make sure that we can put those things out there, and they do make us feel vulnerable, and they are hard to share, but the more that we share them, the more that legislators and decision makers can understand this disease and can understand why it's so essential to pass legislation that can allow us better access to care. So as you think about your one-sentence story, we want you to consider where you can use it. You can use it in an introduction email to your member of Congress, which we certainly encourage you to write. You can also use it by taking advantage of our Action Center. We're going to give you a quick demo of what the Action Center looks like so that you can start to use it and have the full benefit of the materials that are there. So when you come to our website, we have an opportunity to land on our Action Center right on our home page and also in the Fighting for You Advocacy tab. The Action Center is a tool that is 100% driven by your voices and your needs. You'll see a toggle down left-hand navigation where you can look up legislators and track legislation. You'll also see where you can click into any of our action alerts. Whenever you click into an action alert, it'll include a pre-formatted message that includes the bulky legislative ask that we might want you to make. It'll also include a space where you can share your personal story, and we want to make sure that you do so. If you take a look at what an action alert body looks like, you can see that there are different ways that you can personalize your message. The more we personalize our message, the more likely it is that our message will land in the inbox of someone important on Capitol Hill. Now, all of these messages will be read, but especially the ones that are personalized with that constituent story that share what this experience has been for you and make a strong legislative ask, those are the ones that land with your legislative assistant, with the legislative director, with the chief of staff, and so on. So what can you do to make sure that your message is read? Well, if you have 5 minutes and 5 minutes alone, we want you to change the subject line of your action alert. It's just up here. Just by swapping this, it'll help to make sure that your message stands apart from any of the other messages or form letters that your member of Congress might receive. If you have 8 minutes, just 3 minutes more, we want you to share your one-sentence story in this personal message area so that you can provide opening comments and change the subject line. With 10 minutes, add a personal thank you and a closing at the bottom here. And if you have 15 minutes, I want to encourage you to take a look at the full message body and add in personal comments and make personal changes throughout. You can do all of these elements in 15 minutes. It takes no more time than that. And I would argue that it's a more worthwhile 15 minutes than those 15 you might spend scrolling on Facebook or through a social media account. These ones will really help to make our voices heard. So take your 15 minutes, change that subject line, add your one-sentence story, add a thank you note, and integrate some of your thoughts throughout the message. Something that's really cool is that once you've populated your first and last name and your home address information, it'll allow you to sign up as an advocate or an ambassador. So if you haven't done so yet, or if you want a friend or family member to join our list, you can send them an action alert, and if they take action, they'll start to receive some updates in the future. And this will remember you. So the next time you come to the Action Center, you won't have to worry about repopulating this information. You'll be able to come down here, add your one-sentence story, press send, and presto, you'll be in business. We also have our Find Legislation and Find Officials tools, and these are important to take a look at, especially as new ambassadors. When we're looking at our Find Legislation tool, here is what we might want to look at. First, we'll have our track legislation on the federal level in the spotlight. If we had a bill there, once we have a bill number for our new step therapy bill, you'll be able to click into it and get the bill text, like we mentioned before, understand our position, and see an opportunity where you can take action. By clicking Take Action, you'll be able to send a message to Congress immediately. You'll also see an area where you can see who the main sponsor of the legislation is and review all of the co-sponsors. By doing so, you'll understand if your member of Congress has decided to support this legislation or not. If they are supportive, you'll be able to send them a message of thanks. If they're not supportive, you'll be able to make a strong ask saying, hey, I noticed you weren't on here. We want to get you there. You'll also be able to see where it is in Congress. You can see if it's been referred to a committee. And this is where we talk about knowing which committees your members of Congress sit on. Let's say your member of Congress is on the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. You'll know that your ask of them to support the legislation and get it out of committee will be more impactful than it would otherwise if you did not know that information. So you'll be able to make that specific ask. When you click Take Action, you'll be routed to an action alert that allows you to send your message on this issue. You'll also be able to search for state legislation. So you can click in, click your state, click your topic, and see any of the bills that come up in that space. Then you'll get the same scope of information. When it comes to finding your legislators, this is where we really want to encourage you to take action today. We want you to type in your zip code and your home address. And the great thing about this tool is that you'll see all of your elected officials, not just your federal members of Congress. You'll get to see everybody, from the President of the United States all the way down to your local assembly people or chamber people. When you look at this list, you might think, oh, well, that's great. What else can I see? Well, if you click into any of your elected officials, you'll be able to see their contact information, including all of their social media information and their phone numbers so that you can make that connection. This is where you might call if you wanted to learn the name of the legislative assistant who might handle health issues. You can also see some personal information here, like their religion, their education, their occupation, and so on. This is a great space to identify a connection that you might have with your member of Congress. Especially if you're coming to the Advocacy Summit, this is a great space to spend some time because this will allow you to do some research ahead of the event that will allow that in-person meeting you have to go nice and smoothly. You'll get to see the political committees that they sit on, take a look for any health committees that might be important to our legislative priorities here, and you can see their staff, so you can have an understanding of who you might be connecting with when you're calling over to the office. If you select their checkbox next to their name and click Compose Message, you'll be able to send your introduction message right through our center. So right through our Lookup Legislators tool, you'll be able to get to this space here. You can include a subject line that says, hey, just wanted to say hello and introduce myself and let you know I'm an advocate for arthritis. And you can include there that you want the contact information for someone to connect with on health legislative issues in the future. From here, I want to encourage you to take action. So yes, we want to send our messages to Congress. We want to make sure that our voices are heard. But we, the Arthritis Foundation, also want to hear your arthritis story. We want to know our ambassadors a little bit better. And one way that we can do that is if you take action by responding to the following prompts in our story bank of our arthritis stories. So you can come here, it'll be a blank slate, and you can let us know what some of the barriers that you've experienced are, and we'll be able to then pair you with some more nuanced and curated ambassador assignments that'll allow you to take action, make sure your voice is heard, and make sure that we are connecting with the appropriate decision maker who can help address your issue and help address the cause. Together, as we take action, we can certainly ensure that the voice of people with arthritis is heard. So we want to say thank you. I know we went over by a couple of minutes here, but thank you so much for joining our orientation today, for joining our briefing today. This has been an hour well spent for our team. We had so much fun talking through our ambassador assignments and our orientation with you, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Any questions that you might have, please direct them to either my email address, jeller@arthritis.org, or slivingston@arthritis.org.